let's take a look at the buffs. Okay, so there's two categories of buffs right now. There's the game-wide skill buffs, where the whole game basically just like global buffs for all of these ships. And then Operation Siren specific buffs, where these ships will have these specific changes only in Operation Siren. So game-wide buffs. All right, so Hiryu meta. Apparently some already buffing her because she's not strong enough yet. But that ship's not even out, so whatever. Javelin Kai. So Javelin retrofit's getting a buff. 10% on the torp efficiency. And her EX barrage buff is increased from 5 seconds to 8 seconds. So her barrage buff will increase for a bit longer, and she has a bit more torp efficiency, which is nice. That'll increase her damage a little bit. She was the weakest out of all of the starter retrofits, so it's nice that they kind of gave her a little bit of a bump. I don't know how much the 10% torp efficiency is really going to make a difference, but anything really helps to help her DPS out a little bit. So not too bad there. Javelin Kai, all Tai Ho class, gain 10% evasion rate after launching basically their barrage that procs every X amount. Rate is the important part. Yeah, rate is the important part. So this actually makes it pretty good. Evasion rate is what you want. Percent evasion isn't as good as evasion rate. So this is actually pretty solid. Gives them, increases their survivability a little bit, which is one of their issues that they had. It obviously doesn't make them do any more damage, but it helps them survive a bit longer. It just makes them a bit more usable in general, because they were falling a little bit to the side. So yeah, obviously very welcome all Takao. So that's Arago, Takao, Maya, and Chokai. Thank you. So South Dakota shield time skill interval starts from 15 seconds, and every 12 seconds buffs firepower by 10%, stacking 3 times. So South Dakota as well as one of those battleships that wasn't super good. She was used with Washington for PvP, and the old WAST fleet setup with Washington, South Dakota. But that's kind of fallen off. That's not really meta anymore. So she kind of fell off the wayside. Yeah, giving her a little bit more firepower is going to be nice. And but I don't know. The problem with being a battleship is that there's just already so many good battleships that are just always going to be really, really good. That I don't think a buff like that's going to make a significant difference in terms of her performance compared. It's just nice for them to just, give them a little something, throw them a bone so they're not totally irrelevant. Okay, so Prince of Wales, this is one you guys were talking about before. Now buffs herself by 10% per Eagle Union member for firepower, anti-air, reload, and evasion for up to a max of 30%. Having 3 or more Eagle Union members means you have 50% faster first volley, increased aviation and anti-air by 15% to backline, and 15% firepower and anti-air to vanguard. So this is pretty good. Eagle Union is, for a maximum of 30%, you only need 3 Eagle Union members. And if you have one in your backline, let's say Essex, and then you have like 2 in your front line, let's say like Phoenix, Portland, bam, like that's it. You have 30% buff for firepower, anti-air, reload, and evasion for Prince of Wales. You have increased aviation for your Essex, 15%, and then firepower and anti-air to your Vanguard. So this is pretty strong. I think this is pretty good. In just by the numbers. I think she'll be really nice to have for players honestly in World 13. Might be pretty good just for the 15% anti-air buff and anti-air buff to herself as well. I think she's pretty okay. Yeah, just a lot of buffs, and it's really good. And you're basically using all Eagle Union members unless you're using like more than 5 ships in your fleet. Because you needed 3 to max out her own buff, and then everybody else gets 15 backline, 15 to firepower, and AA for the Vanguard. So it's pretty good. I don't know. It seems really good. And Eagle Union ships are like, there's a lot of really good Eagle Union ships. It's not like you have to like go out of your way to use Eagle Union ships. I think this is really strong. This is the first time that I read most of these, by the way. So these are just like my first impressions. Sandy, even more. Yeah, San Diego, 15% more firepower and anti-air. Just be super good. So Ajax, Achilles, and Exeter Kai increase evasion by 15%, increase damage to evasion by 15. So not evasion rate, evasion, which is not as good as rate. Increase damage to medium enemies by 25%. If 4 consecutive shots hit the same enemy, then they are slowed by 30% for 5 seconds. And once you slow something, it becomes easier to hit them. So if you have multiple of them on there, you could probably like perma slow things. Yeah, I mean, the evasion increase is nice. It sucks it's not rate, but it makes them a little bit more tankier. And damage to enemies by 25% is nice as well. I think it's good. Just kind of, again, just a bit of a nod to make them a bit better. Okay, so Shokaku and Zukaku, both of them getting buffs, which is really nice. Actually, to me, it's a bit of a surprise that these 2 ships are getting buffs. I mean, they weren't super good, but I think they were kind of underrated. So 3 or more IGN ships. Sorry, let's do Shokaku for Shokaku. Crane's protection applies at the moment of airstrike, meaning that Shokaku's buff applies to her own airstrike. Crane's protection, when launching an airstrike, all ships in the fleet deal 10% more damage and take 10% less damage for 12 seconds. So apparently this procced after she launched her airstrike, and so it wouldn't proc for hers. But now the buff will apply to her own airstrike. So essentially she's giving herself 10% more damage every airstrike, which is pretty good. Pretty good. We take that. Zuikaku, 3 or more IGN ships equals 20% airstrike damage buff and more subsequent airstrike. Every subsequent airstrike increases next airstrike damage by 20% up to max of 3 stacks. So this is good for longer battles. I think in the past, I think Shokaku and Zuikaku were already preferred for longer battles. Akagi and Kaga for the shorter battles because of their quicker first airstrike. But this just makes them even better. So Shokaku, 10% damage buff to herself, basically. And Zuikaku, 20% airstrike damage buff if you have 3 or more IGN ships. Does that include herself? If that includes herself, you basically just need 1 other IGN ship because you're using Zuikaku with Shokaku. So that's 2. So you just need 1 more. Literally just put in 1 IGN ship and you get 20% airstrike damage buff on Zuikaku, which is pretty good. And then every subsequent airstrike increases the next one by 20%. So long battles, good. So Shokaku and Zuikaku are looking pretty good for boss battles. Like boss battles are looking pretty good. The only issue that I can see for using them in like World 12, World 13 is that their AA is pretty low because their IGN tend to have low AA, but they're going to be really strong in terms of just raw damage output over time. It's going to get better and better with Zuikaku's skill. So that's really good. I like this buff. I like these buffs. Victorious. Damage to battleships increased by 20%. Damage from arcing shells reduced by 20%. Allied carrier damage to battleships buffed by 10%. So she does more damage to battleship. She takes less damage from arcing shells, which is nice. Allied carrier damage to battleship specifically buffed by 10%. Where would be a good place for like you would want more battleship damage to battleship versus battleships? You're right, Bean. You're absolutely right. PvP against battleship fleets? Yeah, I guess so. Does this include battle cruisers? Because then if it's so, it's just basically Nagato from PvP. That's basically the only, Warspite, I guess. Warspite and Nagato. I can't right off the top of my head think of like a really specific good use for this. Reduced damage incoming is okay, I guess. Allied carrier damage to battleships. It's just like a lot of battleship, like damage to battleship specific stuff that I just can't think of like a good niche for right now. Maybe there is one that I just can't think of one, or maybe there will be one coming up in Operation Siren. Massachusetts, up to 15% damage buff based on shell travel time when equipped with USN secondary, increases from 15 to 30% max bonus depending on US secondary for SHS, and 30% bonus. Otherwise normal shells get boosted by up to 15%. This is so bad. This is super heavy shells are so bad. They distance traveled by max of 30%. Yeah, that's cool and all, but then they miss. They're so inaccurate. They're so inaccurate. They're so bad. She does no damage. So maybe, I guess I still need to hit in order to do the 30% bonus damage. Hopefully this helps a little bit. I'm happy about it. I don't know how useful it'll be because she still kind of needs to hit super heavy shells. Depending on US secondary for super handy shells and 30% bonus. Okay, otherwise normal shells get boosted by up to 15%. Okay. Wait, is this saying that, okay, the way this is worded is make me think that use a US secondary to activate the super heavy shells. Otherwise you can just not use as US secondary and you don't get super heavy shells. We'll see how it works with the super heavy shells. But now that I have the option to not use them, that's pretty good. I think that's good because super heavy shells are so bad. They miss all the time. Like, I don't care if I have 150% damage bonus. If I don't hit, it's still doing 0 damage. I'm still doing 0 damage. I'm doing nothing. So being able to just swap to just like not super heavy shells and get boosted still by 15%, I think that's a good option. I think that's nice. The fact that it's optional now, I think is the real buff here. All right, Tai Ho. One of the 3 airstrikes barrage is guaranteed, and the subsequent other 2 rolls have a 25% chance of rolling. Instantly, that's a damage like DPS increase because like you're guaranteed 1 airstrike. And you have a 25% chance. And the fact that one of the barrages is guaranteed, just instant DPS increase. Instant DPS increase. So that's pretty good. Decent buff for her. Reno, 5% main gun efficiency, 5% torp efficiency. That's just a 5% flat DPS increase on main gun and torp. There's a CV or a CVL in the fleet, increase crit rate by 35%. That sounds high. Increased damage to DDs and CLs by 10%, stacking up to 3 times per CVC. Wait, what? Okay, the crit rate isn't stacking 3 times, right? It's just the damage? Just the damage stacks, right? If the CVLs are in the same fleet as Reno for the first 4 battles, reduce damage taken by 10% for both. So increase damage to DDs and CLs by 10%, up to 30% per CVL. If the CVLs in the same fleet as Reno, the first 4 battles reduce damage taken by... That sounds really good. That sounds really good. That sounds strong. Right off the bat, you have a 5% just DPS buff, like just damage buff from your main gun and torps with the efficiency increases. Then you have a 35% crit rate increase. And then on top of that, you're doing 30% more damage to DDs and CLs. And then on top of that, you're also taking 10% less damage for 4 battles. It sounds like it's Reno and 1 CVL that has the decrease. But even still, like, I care more about damage reduction on my Vanguard. That sounds really good. What's Reno's anti-air? 479 at level 120. And now that she'll have damage to back up her anti-air and be pretty tanky as well, boys, is Reno the second best light cruiser to bring to World 12 and World 13 in the game now? You're just bringing in 3 carriers anyway. And she can use DD guns, actually. She can use the baguette gun. And her anti-air gun efficiency is 170%. This seems good. Because right now the main gun crit rate is 15%. And it's going up to 35%. And instead of first and second battles of each sortie, it's the first 4. Looking really damn good. And Eagle Union? Use it with Prince of Wales, Pog? All right, Graf Zeppelin now. I've heard good things about the Graf Zeppelin buffs. People are really happy about her. Let me open up her current stats so I can compare. Aviation to 423. Her current aviation is 400 at level 120. 23 more aviation, reload 127 from what's currently 115. So a small buff in reload there as well, which is nice. Third slot can be equipped with Torp bombers. Equipping only 1 KMS aircraft will increase all aircraft efficiencies by 30%. 30% aircraft, all of them. And they're currently 120, 130, 130. 120 for fighters, 130 for dive bombers. And then the third slot will be 130 for dive bombers and torp bombers. So you have 160 for dive bombers and torp bombers. That sounds really good. And now you only need 1 KMS aircraft. That's really good. That is so much better than what she has now. So right now, Graf Zeppelin requires only the German aircraft that you're using will receive the additional 30% efficiency. But now you only need to equip 1 aircraft and all of your aircraft efficiencies are increased by 30%. So you can actually equip good planes and have their efficiency increased by 30%. That's good. That's really good. Merchantman with Helldivers. Yeah, exactly. Something like that. Something as simple as that. So your fighter efficiency just went up 30%, and your dive and torp bombers that you can actually use, like proper ones now, like Barracuda and like SP2 Helldivers and stuff. You can actually use good ones now, and they'll have 30% efficiency as well. That's really good. That is a really good buff. That's 30% extra damage on your torp and torpedo bombers and dive bombers. That's just strong. Really, really good buff. She comes out. I think Reno and Graf Zeppelin have the 2 best buffs. Prince of Wales, I think, is up there again. Prince of Wales, Reno, and Graf Zeppelin, I think, are the 3 biggest buffs. The 3 biggest winners out of this. Shokaku and Zukaku, I think, are going to be pretty solid as well. They're going to be good for longer battles. So like boss battles. Every other buff, not including the Hero Meta one, we're not sure about that one, but every other buff I think is just kind of just like a small bump to keep her a bit more relevant and not really game changing. Just kind of like, yeah, this ship exists. Here's a buff so you can continue using her and having an easier time with them. I think Tai Ho is a bit above that though. I think Tai Ho, that's a straight DPS increase, I think, with one of the barrages being guaranteed. Yeah, I think the biggest loser, South Dakota, I don't see that being super great. Firepower by 10% is, I mean, 30% firepower is like, okay, maybe. Victorious, the damage to battleships specifically, again, like really keeps her in that niche. In terms of general use, she's still not going to be super good, so that kind of sucks. And Ajax, Achilles, and Exeter, the evasion, it sucks it wasn't evasion rate, but that would have been really good. Evasion increase, not evasion rate, so it's not as good, but still not too bad, and it slows down the enemies, which might be useful. Medium enemies by 25% increased damage, but yeah, that's really good. For the global buffs, again, this was going to be game-wide skill buffs. So across the whole game, global buffs for all of these ships. Graf Zeppelin, Reno, and Prince of Wales, definitely the top 3, in my opinion.